Hello everyone, Sidewin here. Today I'm going to be building out essentially my Thief Iconic, I guess. I don't really know what to call it, up to level 5. Every character that I build like this is meant to be fairly usable for new players. And for this one, it's the Gnome Rogue. I have the image in Path Builder over there. And I'm going to be explaining at each level how you can play this character a little bit. This video will be divided into chapters. So for the background, I'm going to go with Street Urchin. It gives thievery and pickpocketing, which is very useful for if you're going thief. Why did that just... It's just doubling up something. So essentially, I'm going to increase standard ability boost, strength and dexterity, and then increase constitution, wisdom, and charisma. So the idea with the charisma or constitution or wisdom is essentially you can pick between the three. In this case, I'm going with charisma because charisma skills are very useful for role-playing type things. But if you're going to go with more medicine focused or more hit points and durability, you might go with wisdom or constitution. You might also decide to go in here and increase strength by 1 more to have no penalty for using armor. Or you might dump strength, which is also an option, and then just go with lighter armor. But that can reduce survivability, and it's not really something I would just hand to a new player. So then for skill training, I'm going to go in here and pick up all the charisma skills. Medicine, because it's generally applicable. It's always nasty when no one in your party picked up medicine. And then nature and religion with these selections. Essentially, this gives you a good base for different recall knowledge skills. And it gives you a good amount of role-playing options. Because you're a thief, you also have proficiency in thievery, and rogues automatically get stealth. So then with the extra skill boost, because, well, you're a thief, so you already have thievery, and the street urchin background also gives thievery, you have an open skill to kind of pick what you want. I usually lean towards picking up athletics. For example, it affects swimming, but you could easily just choose any other skill here. That's something that's very easy to shift around. Then with heritage, I'm going with Umbral Gnome to get dark vision, because if you're a thief, you're going to be sulking around in dark places a lot, and it's better to be able to see. Ancestry feat, well, there's lots of options, basically, but I'm going with Illusion Sense so that you can see through any illusions that are used, because Illusion Sense essentially, well, it's essentially a... Illusions can be problematic. That's the best way to phrase it. Then for the class feat, I'm going to go with Tumble Behind. With all of these builds, I'm going with a more team-focused thing. And essentially, this lets you more effectively flank your foe. It lets you roll through them, get behind them, and once you're behind them, you can then strike with sneak attack, depending on various action, like pairing together. With the skill feat, you can pick pretty freely, but I'm going to go with Battle Medicine because a little extra healing is never really something you want to avoid. Then for weapons, I'm using martial weapons only because martial weapons are very much a... Martial weapons are basically, if you have access to them, they're, for the most part, just better than simple weapons. And what you're looking for with a thief rogue is you're looking for agile and finesse. So that's because agile lets you attack more than once at a lower penalty, but the more important one is finesse, because it lets you attack with dexterity. Then the thief rogue can also apply damage using their dexterity score. And really, you can go with a lot of different options, but in this case, a Fleisa or a Rapier is pretty standard because they're both pretty, like, normal. There are 2 different weapon groups, and in this case, I'm going to put both of them on the character. because both are essentially, they're both good options. Where's Lysa? And generally with this character, it's not a dual weapon build, so you would most likely only use one of these. But the reason I'm picking up both now is so that anyone using this build can take the sheet, and then you can pick which one you're using. You can technically just sell the other one and take back the gold. Because at level 5, it gives access to weapon groups, and these are 2 different weapon groups. Then for defense, I'm going to go with, where is it? Well, leather armor is always just studded leather is better. But in general, you can just go through and figure out which one works best. They should give the same with this build. Yeah, they give the same AC. So you can put leather instead of studded leather, and the AC will still be 18. From there, this is why you can choose to not increase strength at all, because, well, you kind of have the bonus given. I'm just explaining the different things there. And you can use that strength, swap it over to Constitution or Wisdom. And if you're using only the one-handed weapon, you can also pick up a buckler here, which essentially lets you use things in that second hand, but it doesn't let you hold a weapon. It's just a good thing to have for if you need it. Then with gear, you always pick up an adventurer's pack, and the rest of the gold's free to be used for other things. So that's level 1. The basics of playing it are pretty much just the try to flank your enemies, get behind them, etc. It's not complicated to take from there. Alright, now let's continue to level 2. So at level 2, the rogue gets to increase one of their skills. For this build, I would increase one of the charisma skills, probably deception, or thievery. Thievery is useful because if you're playing a more dungeon-based adventure, it will help you disarm traps. So in this case, that's what I'm going with, because it's fairly generally applicable. Then with these various options, mobility is a good one for this character because it essentially lets you not trigger reactions of any kind, such as attacks of opportunity. Those are relatively rare, but when they exist, they can be pretty nasty. Where's the other one? Underhanded assault is also useful if you think you can sneak up to allies. It kind of relies on the campaign a little bit here. And then unbouncing blow lets you essentially follow up on a critical hit and hurt your enemy again. Which, it's really, I would pick between those three. For the most, general, I'm going with mobility for this particular one, because getting around enemies it keeps tying with that earlier tumble behind. Essentially, this character can move around enemies to better support their allies, such as getting behind them, or getting in front of them, or going to the side of them. Then for the skill feat, the Eyes of the City, it's really skill feats depend on your campaign. I typically would go with Eyes of the City for this, because it lets you track creatures and settlements, which can be very useful for a thief or someone trying to kill someone. And then Slippery Prey lets you escape easier. The more generally applicable one of, it's really those three. Wary Disarmament, Slippery Prey, or Eyes of the City. For dungeon campaigns, Wary Disarmament here is the best. I did not go through skill feats before starting this video. But essentially, it gives you a bonus against traps. So continuing on that upgrade to Thievery, this is good for dungeoneering campaigns. So the only thing that really changes at level 2 for this build is you have additional statistics, and you want to gain a potency rune for your weapon. Potency runes, you essentially want them by certain levels. So I'm going to apply them to both weapons in this case. I tend to run with automatic bonus progression, where these are just given to PCs. But if you're playing another campaign, you cannot just apply this. However, the expectation is you have it by level 2, not you gain it during level 2. Alright, continuing to level 3 now. Essentially, level 3 is the point at which you gain deny advantage, which means that you cannot be made off guard or similar to enemies, which are... I have a cat on my lap right now, so that's why I'm moving a little weird. Essentially, it lets you not become off guard to enemies of your level or lower. And that's just the general rogue thing. Then for this additional skill increase, you can't further increase thievery, so you have to pick another skill to increase. I would go with deception or stealth. In this case, I'm going with stealth because I've basically been building this assuming a more dungeon-based campaign. So for general feats, you generally do not want to take skill feats as your general feat, as a rogue, because you already get that. And with this expert in stealth, I'm going to go here, and I'm probably going to pick up armored stealth. I'm just going to check quick that leather actually gives a penalty. Yes, it gives a -1 penalty to stealth. So in here, you can get armored stealth to reduce that penalty to 0. And that essentially lets you wear armor and not be seen easier. Then with the skill feat, that's the armored stealth one. Okay. I'll just swap that quick and then swap it. For the general feat, you don't want to pick up a skill feat. One generally applicable one is Untrained Improvisation. It lets you add your proficiency bonus divided by a certain value to any checks that you do not have proficiency in. Which, note, for the rogue, you're proficient in almost anything, so it shouldn't come up much. So it's not the one I would go with, but if you're playing anything else, it's pretty much great. And then Fleet is another generally applicable one, gives you additional movement speed, and the Incredible Initiative gets you a bonus on initiative rolls. That's the one I'm going with here because it lets you get the jump on enemies. Then the other thing that should happen by level 3 is you gain a skill item that gives you a bonus to skill checks. So that would probably be under magic items. They're in alphabetical order in this case, so you kind of have to go through. But your jam should have a list of these. I'll probably create a separate video for that type of thing. But they give bonuses to certain types of, like, abilities. So, like, Corpse Compass gives you a bonus to survival check to try and figure out where an undead is. It essentially gives situational bonuses. And again, like, this build's play does not shift much at this additional level. It just improves what it's already been doing. Now for level 4. Level 4 is continuing along the same lines. You get another skill increase, which still cannot be applied to those skills you've already gotten to expert. So at this point, I'm going with deception. Because I've mentioned it at every other level, why not? So then you can kind of go through and see, again, skill feats are very campaign dependent. So if you're doing a lot of dungeoneering, sneaking around people, then you could pick up Quiet Allies and make it so that your allies are more sneaky when they're following you. Or you might go with Shadow Mark, which lets you better sneak around a certain enemy. And you could also choose to pick up, like, Discreet Inquiry to get more information out of people without them realizing that you're getting that information, Fleeting Diversion, gives Creative Version, Backup Disguise, etc. So it's really just you see what's applicable for you. I recommend swapping around these depending on what your own campaign is requiring, because by this level you should probably have a clue what you're doing. So in this case, I'm going to go with Confabulator because it essentially reduces the penalty for failing on deception checks. So basically, if you lie once, your opponent gets a bonus to telling that you're lying again. In this case, it helps take away some of that bonus, so you can lie once and then lie twice, and then you're likely to succeed on the second time than you otherwise would be. Didn't know that was there. Alright, so again, like, if you're building based off a team here, you want to somewhat pick these based off that. So if you're doing a lot of disguises and sneaking, Scoundrel Surprise is the one I'd recommend. If you are frequently fighting foes after they've been intimidated, such as if you have a barbarian scaring everyone or a sorcerer, then Dread Striker is useful because that applies frightened, and then you can immediately strike them and apply precision damage. So in general, the one I would say, if you're going very generic though, is Predictable. It lets you sense motive against a foe to determine what their strategy is, so you get a bonus to AC. This can be useful if you're fighting an enemy who is higher level than you. So another thing that is gained at level 4, it's another rune. You typically get your first striking rune. It gives an additional die of damage to your weapons. Again, you should gain this sometime during level 3, or if you're using automatic bonus progression variant, you get it exactly at level 4. So I'm going to apply it to both of these weapons so that you can essentially, I'm basing it off automatic bonus progression. And I will note at this point that to get the build at any of the levels I've shown, you can just go into Path Builder, click on the level, and select the level that you want to be at. So we're nearly done now, picking up from that little side tangent. Level 5 is the point at which you gain ability boosts. These let you increase the scores you've already had to a higher level. So first off, you nearly always want to increase your key ability statistic, dexterity in this case. And then, based off what you've been doing, you probably want to, for this build, increase wisdom, charisma, and constitution. If you've instead found that you've been doing things that constitution doesn't apply to as much, you might go with intelligence to give another skill, but it's not really as important for rogues. And then you also get a skill increase. You still can't get any of them to master. So at this point, you basically just choose whichever skill you've been using the next most. I'm going with intimidation here, just because intimidation or medicine. I'll click medicine this time, but it's basically you base it off your own circumstances. A lot of this is very dependent. Then you also get a ancestry feat, which depends by ancestry, of course. So then, one thing which might be nice for this is the Natural Illusionist. This is actually the one that lets you cast an illusion yourself. So it lets you, once per day, cast one of a set of illusion spells. Essentially, you can slightly change your appearance, you can project your voice, you can summon an item, etc. Or you can do Project Persona, which essentially lets you conceal that you're wearing armor. But if a creature touches it, they see through it. In this case, I'm going with Project Persona because hiding that you're armored and have weapons and such is kind of what a thief will frequently be trying to do. But Natural Illusionist is also a good option. Then for the skill feat, and like note here, you're looking for the highest level ones that have been unlocked, because typically if you have a higher level 1 unlocked, it means that you can continue what you've already done. And I'm picking only common feats here, but if you're playing in a typical game, you can ask your GM, hey, can I pick up a non-typical feat? So one option here is just you look for, like, at this point, I don't really have a specific skill feat. You're probably getting that feel. So I'm just going to pick Lie to Me, which lets you tell if someone's lying. But you pick it based off your campaign. That's really what I'm trying to get across here. With this entire video, I highly recommend you shift the build to suit whatever your campaign is. And one last thing is you also gain a armor potency rune at level 5. This goes on your armor and gives you a +1 bonus to AC. So then this is the level 5 version of the build. And the playstyle is not really changed between the levels. It's still focused on getting behind your enemies and stabbing them. And that kind of reflects what the Thief Rogue is. It doesn't get more complex than that. Which is why I highly recommend the class for new players. And I really encourage you to modify these builds to suit your campaign. If you're playing a more social-oriented campaign, swap some of the skills more to social things. Swap some of the feats, swap some of the abilities. But if you're playing like Abomination Vaults, this build should be fairly good. You can still shift it depending on like what your campaign is. Thank you for watching. If you've got any questions or comments on this, feel free to comment below. I apologize for any interruptions caused by my cats.